The farm lay silent beneath the African sky. Where buildings had once stood, there were only broken walls and scattered stone. Grass had grown thick across the fields, swallowing the last traces of roads and fences. Here and there, the bleached remains of livestock still lay where they had fallen. But this is not how the place was first recorded. What remains of Brereton, of its people, its animals and its life, survives largely through drawings. Quick, expressive sketches made by a man who lived here, worked here and carried paper with him wherever he went. Through those drawings, kindly shared by his granddaughter Henry Lea, the world of the veld can still be seen. This was Brereton, in the Transvaal, in the aftermath of the Second Anglo-Boer War. Not long before, it had been a working frontier homestead, a place of cattle, trade and hard-earned routine. Now it was a ruin, abandoned and stripped bare. And yet someone chose to return. Not a soldier, not a general. A farmer, an artist. His name was Henry Lea. He did not arrive to an empty land. Long before Brereton became a farm, this ground had been shaped by conflict and survival. African kingdoms had risen and fallen here. What later appeared as open land carried memory of struggle, displacement and endurance. By the time the settlers arrived, it was already a place layered with history. British ambition, Boer independence and African resistance met here in uneasy balance. Authority was distant, and law depended on those who stood their ground. This was the world Henry Lea stepped into. He had come from England, drawn to a life shaped by land, by labour and by independence. Before leaving, he learned farming, working long days behind heavy horses in the fields. It was there that two parts of his life began to merge. He worked and he drew. He carried paper and pencil with him wherever he went. A few quick lines were enough to capture what he saw. The movement of animals, the posture of a rider, the energy of a moment before it passed. The local hunt, the warmth of the farm homestead. Many of the images you are seeing now come from those sketches, drawn quickly, often in the moment, and preserved long after the scenes themselves had disappeared. Horses especially held his attention. He returned to them again and again, studying their movement, their strength, the way they carried both work and life across the land. In time he left for South Africa. In the South-Eastern Transvaal, near a little dorp called Vakkerstrom, he and his brother began to build something from very little, a farm, and on it they opened a small store, trading with scattered farms across the region, and gradually established themselves in a remote and uncertain landscape. The store became more than a place of trade. It was a meeting point. Boer farmers arrived on horseback or by ox wagon, sometimes to buy supplies, sometimes simply to talk. Coffee was poured, news exchanged and stories shared of hunting, hardship and long journeys into the interior. And Lea drew. He sketched what he had heard as well as what he saw, the stories of the voortrekkers, the dangers, the moments of survival. He was recording not just events, but the way they were remembered, where memory and observation sat side by side. Around him, life on the farm settled into a pattern. This was not a single society. Boer families lived nearby, shaped by tradition and land. At the same time, Zulu workers and their families lived and worked on the farm. Lea observed them all. He made countless drawings of settlers, animals, and the Zulu workers on the farm. Scenes of labour and daily life, capturing gesture and movement. And always there were horses. They moved through every part of this world, on the farm, on the road, in memory and story. Lea returned to them constantly. With just a few lines, he could suggest motion and tension. By the late 1890s, Brereton was thriving. The store was successful. The farm was growing. Trees planted years earlier had taken hold, and herds had begun to build. Neighbours gathered more often, sometimes from miles away. At one Christmas celebration, nearly 100 people arrived, filling the homestead with noise, movement, and life. It was a world built slowly, but with care. Then, war came. It did not remain distant. It moved across the land, reaching even remote farms like Brereton. What had been a place of steady progress was suddenly drawn into something far larger and far more destructive. Lea found himself caught between sides. His brother had become a citizen of the Transvaal and was called to fight for the Boer cause. Lea, still British, was expected to take up arms for the British. He chose neither. For a time, both brothers remained on the farm, trying to stay outside the conflict. But the war allowed little neutrality. Farms were abandoned, livestock vanished, the land itself became part of the struggle. Eventually they were forced to leave. When Lea returned after the war, the scale of the destruction was unmistakable. Brereton was gone. Years of work undone in a matter of months. Recovery would be slow. Lea began again. What had been lost could not be replaced, but it could be rebuilt. Livestock were reintroduced, and structures repaired with what could be found. He did not rebuild alone. His wife, Evelyn, stood beside him. They had married in Cape Town during the upheaval of war, and now faced the task of rebuilding together. She ran the household, cared for animals, and adapted to the demands of life on the veldt. In 1907, their first son Arnold was born. A second, Tony, followed. The farm became more than a place of work. It became a home. Life began to take shape again. The store reopened. Trade resumed. Neighbours returned. Zulu workers continued their roles on the farm. There were setbacks, but also moments of stability. And through it all, Lea continued to draw. His work began to reach beyond the farm. Newspapers and magazines published his sketches, scenes of frontier life, of history, of people and animals in motion. His style remained quick, expressive, and immediate. He was less concerned with perfect detail than with capturing life as it was lived. But his drawings carried more than observation. They carried an idea. The war had left deep divisions. Bitterness lingered, especially among Afrikaners who had suffered loss and defeat. Lea saw this clearly, and he believed those divisions did not have to endure. He began in his own way to work towards something different, to ease the divisions left by war. He contributed drawings to both English and Afrikaans publications. He illustrated stories from the past, not to take sides but to preserve them, to show that history, however contested, was shared. One of his most ambitious works was a depiction of the Battle of Verkop, drawn from the memories of an old Voortrekker neighbour who had taken part. The image captured this moment from the Great Trek, the laager under attack, defenders holding their ground, horses surging forward in the chaos of battle. It was painstaking work, a labour of time and attention. When it was finished, it was more than an illustration. It was a gesture, an Englishman preserving Afrikaner history, a recognition of the past, offered without ownership or claim. Copies were distributed widely, even to schools, carrying the moment forward to a new generation. Lea hoped that, in small ways, such work might help bridge the divide. He imagined a future in which English, Afrikaner and African communities might live with greater understanding. It was an ambitious vision, one shaped by the realities he had lived through, and by a belief that shared history could form a foundation for something better. In 1913, after years of work, Lea left South Africa with his family for a visit to England. It was meant to be temporary, a pause, a rest after long years on the land. But history intervened once again. In 1914, war broke out in Europe. Lea joined the British Army. He was 44 years old, older than many who had enlisted. But he went anyway, perhaps to prove something, perhaps because he felt he should, perhaps because the questions left unresolved by the earlier war still lingered. The war in Europe was unlike anything he had known. Vast, mechanized, relentless. The destruction was on a different scale entirely, far removed from the rhythms of farm life. He did not speak much about it afterward. But even there he continued to draw. In quieter moments, when time allowed, he sketched what he could. Small scenes, fragments of life, glimpses of humanity in the midst of something overwhelming. When the war ended, he returned to South Africa, to Brereton. After years away, and after the destruction he had seen in Europe, the farm must have felt very different, and yet it remained, rebuilt, reshaped, and still carrying the life he had helped to create. He continued sketching, scenes of daily life, of memory, of the past as it had been told to him, and as he had seen it himself. Horses remained at the centre of his work, their movement and grace still captured in quick, confident lines. He later wrote his autobiography, published in 1936 as A Veldt Farmer's Adventures. It centred on Brereton, the place he had built, and where he would die in 1940. But the story did not end with him. Both of his sons, Arnold and Tony, would serve in another war, the Second World War. They joined South African regiments and were sent to North Africa, part of a conflict that once again stretched far beyond the land their father had known. Arnold would return home. Tony would not, killed in Italy. It was another loss, in another war, in a century shaped again and again by conflict. And yet, what Henry Lea had left behind endured. In his drawings, the world of the veldt remains. The farm, the people, the shared lives that unfolded there, the Zulu workers, the Boer neighbours, the long journeys across open land. He had arrived to find a place already shaped by history. He had lived through its upheaval. He had tried in his own way to make sense of it, to record it, to preserve it, and perhaps even to reconcile it. And in doing so, Henry Lea ensured it would not be forgotten.